Hello, it's the Monaghan Way, episode 20, would you believe, in association with Northern Sound and myself here, Sean McCaffrey. And we thought, with it being episode 20, a little milestone for us to have reached here, we'd reach out, and we're actually crossing the Atlantic, would you believe, but still very, very strong connections to Monaghan, which, of course, is the premise of this podcast. I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Patrick Murray. A man with very, very strong connections to the Clonus area, the Murray name synonymous with intercounty football back in the 80s. And this gentleman, Patrick Murray, he's synonymous with NFL football as well, and so much that we can tie in between our own county and, of course, that sport as well. So first things first, Patrick, thanks a million for taking our call. As I say, the world is such a small place that we can link up like this and have a chat to start off with. So it is. And just from your own perspective, as I said, Murray by name is a name we'd all be associating, a good Irish name, even though you are American born and bred.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, Sean, it's a pleasure to hear the accent because here in Naples, Florida, we don't get many of them accents. So it's like being back at home. So it's a pleasure to be on. And yes, the Murray name is kind of synonymous in Monaghan as far as football is concerned with Kieran and Brendan. And let's not forget my dad, the eldest of the brothers there. He played for Clonus for a long, long time. He was a decent footballer in his own right. But look, growing up coming back and being on the Newtown Butler Road with Nana's house there and just going into the sitting room and watching old Monaghan games of Kieran and Brendan doing their thing and obviously Nudie and guys like that. That was really my first love. And I credit Gaelic football to allowing me to get to the stage where I could play in the NFL because of the training that I did, because of the ledge strength that I could kind of get from kicking that gob ball over the bar in St. Tiernock's Park. So as you can tell, I'm pretty passionate and I could go on, but I'll leave it there for now.
Yeah, and maybe that's where we'll start back, because your summers, and you're still young, might I add, but as a young boy was spent in Clonus, as you noted there, back at your dad's homestead, and obviously Newtown Butler Road. Anybody's familiar with Clonus, it's only a dander up the hill then to get to St. Tiernock's Park. So did you actually play the game when you were home for them summers? Did you affiliate in with the club?
Yeah, I did. So if you know the Rehills, right? They're involved
Yeah,
with Clonus.
very.
They grew up. Their house was right next to my nana's house. So I grew up with the Rehills basically. Every summer we'd be out kicking a ball either in the back garden or we'd go up to St. Tiernock's Park or the park across the road. So yeah, I got involved where I could. I used to train with Clonus back in the day. I used to play little challenge matches with them back in the day. I wasn't able to get the transfer over any time to play in an actual match, but I stayed very close and very involved because really Gaelic football is my favorite sport out there. I think it's the best sport that any young person can play. So for me to have the ability to play in Clonus when I would used to go home, and I do mean home because that's where I consider my home to be, and then to come and play for Rockland in New York, tying those two together, it allowed me to just continue to keep that presence of Ireland throughout the year.
Yeah, and it's interesting that you have such a passion for the game. As you said, you were able to come home and play it in those challenge games, train with the young ones that were there, obviously play then, as you noted, and then in later years with Rocklands. To have that passion for sport that you couldn't competitively play when you were young. Obviously, NFL became your focus. It obviously was a tie back. It was the Irishness in you coming out.
Oh, there's no doubt about that. I mean, people would naturally say that I am much more Irish than I am American, and I take that as a huge compliment. But it's a way for me to stay connected to my family. And it's a way for me to stay connected to the place that gave me so many positive memories growing up. It's a way for me to have my kids now be connected to their cousins and to everybody still back in Ireland. I mean, we don't watch much TV in our house, but we watch when Monaghan's on. And that may be odd. You don't get much of that here, but it's important to me. It's important to my kids to know what that sport is so we can relate back home.
Yeah, absolutely. And it must be strange for them. Have they had an opportunity to come home to actually
Yeah.
see a game in reality? They have, so they've experienced that.
They have, yeah. In bits and pieces. They're still young, so they don't necessarily get the game yet. But I make it a point every time we're back, and we're back every year, to get them to either a training session or a match just to kind of feel the energy. And you mentioned it. I played in the NFL for 6 years. I played at the highest level. They've never been to an NFL game. They've never been to an American football game. That just shows you how important it is to me.
Yeah, and that's a nice little lead in maybe to the NFL. And you touched on it yourself there. Your introduction to Gaelic football, the kicking of that ball led to what you became as a professional, a kicker in the NFL.
Yeah, well, going from kicking in St. Tiernock's Park and imagining, I'm Paul Finley or I'm Tommy Freeman putting over a free to win Ulster, and then having that translate to, well, now we're bringing American footballs into St. Tiernock's Park, and I'm kicking them over the bar, and I'm imagining playing on Sundays in the NFL. It's kind of an interesting parallel because when I was coming up to eighth grade, and that's about 14 years of age in the US, my dad basically said, look, I think you could do this kicking thing. We'd been watching college football, watching the Giants, and watching the local high school team, Don Bosco, which is where I ended up going to high school. And he said, look, with the skills that you have and the training that you have, you could do this and you could potentially get a scholarship. And fortunately, it all worked out that way.
Yeah, and isn't it amazing that it was those skills of kicking the ball, the size 5 O'Neills that could be
Mhm.
transferred over. I will talk about it later on. Like we've seen now a massive pathway that has opened up
Yeah.
for Gaelic players to make that over. But you were probably one of the first to nearly transfer them skills across.
There's no doubt that I was one of the first. I cannot think of anybody else who has the background of Gaelic football and then translating that into American football. As you mentioned, there's loads of guys at it now, and it's finally great to see because there are so many similarities. Obviously you're wearing pads in America, you're not wearing pads, obviously in Ireland, but at the same time, the motion of kicking is very similar. The idea of putting the ball between the posts is very similar. So the fact that I could have been some sort of originator, brings a lot of pride.
Oh, absolutely. And when you were introduced to it by your dad there at 14 years of age, and no doubt the coaches that you were involved in at that stage, were they aware of where your background was coming from? Were they aware that there's a sport in Ireland that's similar, or that this kicking game has come from?
Yeah, so it's funny. Coach Greg Toll, who was my high school coach, his father's from Armagh. So we got to know Coach Toll, and he said, look, I know your background. I know where your dad's from, particularly know the area that your dad's from. You're going to do very well here. And all you have to do for me is kick and punt. I know you can do that. Don't worry about catching. Don't worry about running. You just kick and punt, and you're going to be all right. So it took a guy with a little bit of an idea of my background to say, you know what, this could really work. And fortunately, it did.
And it's a real niche position, I
Mm.
take it, in the NFL. Now, this is where my knowledge of NFL, Patrick, will be up and down, because the game here, it's slowly growing, it must be
Yeah.
said. And in
Yeah.
fairness, what occurred last year with Rory Beggan going over, it definitely opened it up to a lot of us. Super Bowl comes around in February. We all talk about it
Mm.
and we all are aware of it. But I certainly personally wouldn't be still aware of a lot of the positions in the field. We all know of the quarterback and what they do, but the kicker and the punter, it's a very niche position.
Niche is a nice way to describe it, so I appreciate that. We're not viewed as football players all the time, and one of the things I like to tell people is, in my position, you have to earn your keep. Yes, of course, you have to earn your keep at various positions, but it's a little bit more respected if you're a receiver or a defensive back or an O or defensive lineman. As a kicker and a punter, you're a specialist. You better execute, because if you don't execute, points are taken off the board. And it's very easy for a quarterback to have an off day and he throws one or two or three interceptions and come back the next week and there's no problem there. If a kicker misses one, two, or three field goals, you could be looking at losing your job. And that's just the nature of the beast. So you better be mentally strong, and you better be able to perform in situations that require a significant amount of concentration. So I'll take niche. Most people call it quirky, but I'll go with niche from now on.
The pressure then within that role, as you said, you're being brought on for that one job only. And if you miss, you could be out of a job by the end of that game.
You definitely could. And there's been situations where I've missed a kick and they bring in a couple of guys to work out on Tuesday and they potentially look to sign somebody to take my job. And look, if you don't know that going in, you're going in blind. But it will sound a little cocky, and I certainly don't mean it this way, but I never felt that pressure. You can't tell from this video, but I'm not the biggest guy in the world. So to think of me as an NFL athlete, you probably would be at a stretch. So I just took every day for what it was, and I went by and kicked every kick as if it was my last, and I just enjoyed it. I really did enjoy it, and quite frankly, I felt more pressure kicking in Gaelic Park than I ever did in the NFL.
And I take it that's the strongest attribute. Obviously, being able to kick the ball,
Yeah.
kick it the distance, the accuracy. But the mental strength obviously is the bigger part of it, rather than, and obviously you have to have a level of physical
Yeah.
fitness, but the fitness wasn't the biggest part of it.
It wasn't the biggest part of it, but I will tell you, the better of an athlete you are, meaning physical fitness, the better kicker you will be. So I didn't train off on my own. I worked out and lifted and trained with the linebackers. And why did I do that? One, because as you stated, it's a mentality. Those guys have to be the toughest on the field, both mentally and physically. So if I trained with them in the weight room, I was going to develop the physical strength that I needed. The mental component of it, well, that's where you lean on like a quarterback, for instance. So I spent a lot of time with quarterbacks because I wanted to understand what they go through on a weekly basis from a mental perspective. So taking the options that were at my disposal, meaning I could go into the different rooms and speak to the various different other positions, and then applying that to what I did on a daily basis, I think allowed me to be a little differentiated and make up for some of the lack of size that I had with a little bit of ignorance, as we like to say, but at the same time, you've developed that physical strength and you develop that mental toughness by watching guys who have done it and done it very well for a long time.
As a matter of interest in training as part of an NFL team, do they train as a team, or are they training as different units?
So your lifting is going to be broken up into offensive and defensive lifting. And the offense is lifting, the defense is doing conditioning, the defense is lifting, the offense is doing conditioning. So depending, that's
Hmm.
mostly in the off season. But you will have certain days where you're all doing conditioning together, or you're all doing some form of strength work or recovery work together. And they do that, one, because there's 53 guys on a roster plus 10 on the practice squad. So that's a lot of guys to get in the weight room at one time. And two, it kind of allows you to be with your own individual position groups, so you develop camaraderie, and it just makes it a little bit easier for the strength and conditioning coaches as far as management.
Absolutely. And then if there was a number of kickers, would you be then like a unit then as well within yourselves as prepared? I'm just thinking, you are in competition against each
Mhm.
other. It's not like in the Gaelic team where you'll have six
Yeah,
forwards. So if the six guys are training together, they sort of know, well, we're going to be starting together. Whereas
yeah.
if there's three or four kickers together, there's only one of you who's going to get the call.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation. So I've been the youngest guy in the room and I've been the oldest guy in the room. So I've
Yeah.
kind of had both scenarios. And look, I'm not out there to badmouth anybody. I'm not out there
Mm.
to make enemies of anybody. But at the end of the day, I'm there to do my job because it's my job on the line and I have to provide for myself and my family. So I'm happy to be friendly, but I'm certainly not going to give you the tricks of the trade.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. Yeah, you had to be selfish nearly in your perspective, blinkered in your perspective, I suppose, that this is me and me only. So the game's on, and the call comes for the kicker. What happens, Patrick? What occurs for you then when that call comes?
Yeah, so I'm engaged the entirety of the game. I'm not one of the guys that sits on the sideline and sits on the bench and has, 7 cups of Gatorade. That's not just who I am. I would actually be up and down the sideline, tapping the ball up to myself. I'm soloing up and down the sideline just to keep myself mentally sharp, keep myself in the game. So as soon as we get into kicking range, I'll start to get in over to the net and start taking some practice kicks, go through my process. And then third down comes, I'm on the sideline. Fourth down comes, all right, field goal team is up. You walk onto the field, you run through your process mentally, you take your steps back, you take your steps over, you go through, you kick, and you hope you make it.
And the talk about the snap, and this is the difference, I suppose, that Rory would have experienced, is that when he addresses a Gaelic ball, he has time, focus, he
Yeah.
can look, he can step back, he can take a deep breath, he has a routine.
Mm.
It's completely different. Is it something like 1.2 seconds, I think you have from the
Yeah.
snap as a back? It's a unit that has to work. Everything
Yeah.
has to work in synchronized movement, doesn't it?
Yeah, you better trust your snapper and holder. I can tell you, Joe Sullivan is my long snapper from college. He's the best long snapper I've ever had at any level. He's my best friend for a reason. It's because we developed that trust over those 3 years because he's a year younger than me in college. And Brian Wetzel, similarly, who's my holder there. But you better have a significant amount of trust in those guys that they're going to do their jobs perfectly because I can't control where the ball goes from snap to hold. I can only control where it goes from kick. So if the laces are back, if the holder misses the spot slightly, well, that's going to change the angle at which the ball comes off my foot. I have to not think about that. And I have to just remember that these guys are professionals. They're going to put the ball where it needs to be. As long as I go through my process, the kick will go through.
And did those guys go with you as part of you being a kicker then, or would you have had a different snap and holder for each team that you were with?
No, so each team is going to have a different snapper and holder. So in
Yeah.
college, yeah, all those guys went with me the entirety of my college career, pretty much. In the NFL, you could be cut tomorrow, signed with another team, and you're getting to meet a new snapper and a new holder the following day, and you have to develop that trust pretty instantaneously. But at the same time, they're professionals.
Mm.
They know what they have to do. They've been training to do this their entire lives, and they're well paid to do it. So developing that trust was never an issue. It was remembering their names, quite frankly, that was probably a bigger issue.
The bigger shit. And I said, you've been introduced them, and all of a sudden,
Yeah.
you've been putting into this playing
Yeah.
environment, and the pressure. And I come back to it. The time you noted there, the ball coming back, and you should be so used to it coming back in one position, and as you noted, the lace maybe being slightly out. Would you even have time to focus and know something's not right as you would be putting your kick through?
So you would definitely understand if the laces were back. That's pretty obvious
Yeah.
because it's
Yeah.
not used, you're not seeing what you're used to, which is basically just a flat ball. We actually went through drills and practice where we would just kick lace balls, meaning laces completely back, just so we could feel the impact on our foot to understand, okay, if the laces are back, this is the way the ball is going to fly off the foot. So if we have to make an adjustment between that last step and kick, we were able to do that. It's not as easy as many people think because if you hit the laces, it changes the trajectory. It also changes the height that the ball is going to come off the foot. So it does take a little bit of practice to do that, but at the same time, you're a professional. If it's a 30-yard field goal, it doesn't matter where the laces are, the ball should just go through.
Yeah, you should be able to still deliver. And again, that comes back to those that are exponents of kicking the Gaelic ball as well. They know, and some of them will face, maybe O'Neill's is facing them, some will face it away. Everybody has their own little critique. What I find interesting is that you had no control over that. As you said yourself, you were so dependent on others getting everything right for you in that time then as well. So to bring maybe just Rory and the discussion in, and what we've seen with him last year going over, like how big a thing was that for the NFL? We know how big it was from a GA perspective, but like how big a thing was it, Rory, over there on that stage? Like what was taken from what he was fit to do and the distance he could kick the ball?
Yeah, I think they were shocked, quite
Yeah.
frankly, that guys who had never kicked a football in their life pretty much could go out there and perform as well as they did. And I give credit to all the lads, Rory in particular, obviously, because of the affinity I have for Monaghan and the time that I've spent with him both on the field and off. It was very impressive. The combine is no joke. National eyes are on you. You are front and center, and you would have never probably experienced a stadium like that was completely empty. So it brings a different feel to actually executing a kick. And for him to go out there and do what he did as effectively as he did it was very impressive. I think he should have got an opportunity somewhere. I think he deserved that. And I think being in an NFL environment would have allowed him to grow and maybe fine tune a couple of the things that he still needed to fine tune. And I'm talking marginally here. I'm not talking he needed to go and change his swing. I'm not talking he needed to go and change his body composition. I'm talking marginal things that would just allow for a little bit more consistency that you need through a 17-game season. So the fact that he didn't get an opportunity, I feel for him there. I know how hard it is to get an opportunity, but he's a credit to himself to be able to get on that stage and execute the way that he did, and then go back and play senior football in the same breath. It's quite an impressive year.
Yeah, and it would probably be interesting if you looked at it that his kicking style has probably gotten better. As impressive as it was before he went to the NFL, when you see him now, it's even more impressive the distances that he can get on the ball now. But the one thing I note is, and you've seen him what he does, it's a deep intake of breath. It's one step back. you don't even get a step back. I don't think when you're kicking in the NFL, it's literally ball back and you have to go. So it's the power to be able to hit more or less from a stationary position is incredible.
Yeah, it's your fast twitch muscles and it's your hips and your core. If you don't have them pretty strong and pretty well stabilized, then the mechanics of the kick are just off. He's obviously got them in spades, and I would have loved to have seen him get a real chance with some pads on.
Yeah, I know that opportunity was never afforded to him. It's interesting you mentioned with the pads because amazingly, while you might only have a short period of time on the field when it would come to kicking, nasty injuries can be picked up because the ball has come back. You're going to hit it. Obviously, the opposition don't want this ball to be traveling any distance. So it's open season on you as a kicker, isn't it?
It's unfortunate, but you kind of have to not think about it. I mean, I took some knocks playing Gaelic football. I took some knocks playing American football as a kicker because your legs planted, you have no control of anything around you, and you can't think about anything around you. You just have to go through the motions. If you get hit, you get hit. Unfortunately, it's only a 15-yard penalty. You could potentially be hospitalized, and the other team just gets assessed 15 yards, but you kind of know that going in, and you try not to think about it.
Oh, well, absolutely, yeah. In any sport you go into, that's the last thing you would be thinking about. But as I said, it's the unusual situation of that you're brought in to do that one job. When you see how physical the
Yeah.
sport can be and the knocks that in it, that there's little or no protection even for you as a kicker coming in for that specialized sort of role. You noted to me just before we hit the big red button that your dad is fairly competent when it comes as well to place kicking.
Yeah, he's 64 years of age now. He still goes up and trains kickers at the high school that I went to, Don Bosco. But when he was 55 and he was still in the midst of training myself and my brother, he could still knock them in from 45 or 50 yards. When he first came over, there were a couple of open tryouts that the NFL teams used to run, particularly locally, the Giants, the Jets, the Eagles, things like that. He should have went and given it a shot because he had quite the cannon on him from what I hear. But, now I can just tease him that he's and never was, and I'm just a used to be.
And you had the opportunity and availed and afforded of it naturally
Yeah.
enough. Back to Clones then, and those summers that were spent there, and your draw for the Gaelic game, and obviously your uncles then as well. And it's interesting. The weekend gone by, the 1985 team was honoured 40 years from that Division One league success that it had. They were heady days. I remember them obviously being a young boy heading to Crow Park, being lifted over the turnstile and that, and seeing both your uncles Kieran and Brendan in their prime at that time. So it only seemed but natural, I suppose, that there was always going to be a sporting blood flowing through you.
Yeah, look, that was the bar, right? So I needed to get to and exceed that. And if I couldn't do it on the Gaelic field, I was going to do it somewhere else. So, I leaned on them pretty consistently throughout my high school, college, and NFL career. They were very involved. They would always follow the games. They would always watch. And anytime I asked, how did you deal with this situation? How did you deal with that situation? Again, different sports, but the mentality of a superior athlete is fairly similar in that you deal with pressure a certain way, you deal with disappointment a certain way, and you deal with success a certain way. So being able to lean on those two, who obviously had won silverware, as you mentioned, a couple of different times, it was incredibly beneficial for me. They both had children who were successful in sports as well. So we tried to keep the Murray tradition going.
Absolutely. And the difference being there were amateur players, and we
Mhm,
should remember that Gaelic football is still an amateur sport.
mhm.
So there's the day's work that need to be done after the weekend to ensure that they can keep the family. From your perspective, there was probably more of a focus being at the professional end of it. But as you said, ensuring that you were hitting the field goals, that you were going to be there on the roster or on the team for the next weekend to ensure that you were staying in a job.
Yeah, it's funny. I remember Mary, Kieran's wife, got me the All Ireland final game on GAA Go, right before it was GAA Plus. This was a number of years ago, and I was watching it in the Buccaneers facility. And as I tried to explain it to guys who would come in and sit down and wondering what was I watching, the one thing they couldn't get a hold of was that these guys were amateur and that they had to go to a job on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And for me, I understood that because I'd grown up with it. But for a lot of guys, they just didn't understand that they were training the way that they were training, pretty much like professional athletes. The demands were fairly similar. The recovery is fairly similar, and yet you're not being paid. So it takes a real, I don't know what the word is really, but a real sense of pride to train the way that they do, to play on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, where they play, and then go to work on Monday, battered, bruised, beaten, sore, and then you've got a professional athlete over here who I had everything at my disposal as far as recovery is concerned. I didn't want for anything. So having that in the back of my mind always allowed me to kind of appreciate what I was going through a little bit more because I know what the other side is like as far as the amateur games are concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. And the game has evolved so much in those 40 years where we are at the point now. It is professional in every way, bar, as we say, as opposed to players being paid. You mentioned the Buccaneers there, and we should have noted that Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You were with them up until 2017. I know you had two different sort of stints with them. Was it the Cleveland Bears you were with in between? Was that your sort of time in the NFL?
Yeah, so I had originally signed with Chicago Bears out of college. I got released and then I signed with the Buccaneers in 2014. I played a year there. I was going into 2015, tore my ACL, so I had to undergo a 9-month recovery period there. I was released. I got picked up by the Cleveland Browns, played a year there, tore my patella tendon, the same knee. And then I came back to the Buccaneers, played a couple, two more seasons there, and then I had shorter stints with the Saints and Bears after that. So from 2014 to 2020 is really when I was in the league. So I got 6 years out of it.
And just missed out, I think, then, did you? It was in
Yeah.
2020, the Buccaneers, Tom Brady, a man with Cavan blood in him. Imagine that we could have had
Yeah.
Cavan and Monaghan involved in a league in the oh, it's completely escaped me now what you call the final championship game that I mentioned it earlier.
Super Bowl.
Super Bowl. My apologies, Patrick. That was it. The Super Bowl. So we could have had you either end of the field.
That's probably the first time Monaghan and Cavan would have been on the same side of anything.
Absolutely. Did you ever cross paths as a matter of interest with Tom Brady?
Oh, very briefly.
Right.
He is a god amongst football players. He's got a lot going on. He's done tremendous things for the game. He's a tremendous teammate, unbelievably hard worker. So just trying to glean whatever information I could during my time and maybe one or two of his fitness tips. That's pretty much what our conversation centered around.
When you consider how big the sport is over in America, and we see it now, it's big around the world. It's actually
Mhm.
coming here to Ireland to prepare in Croke Park for it with the colleges games that we're here and that as well. It's hard to get into it, I'd imagine, at the level that you were at a professional level. So you it's a small percentage that reached the peak of the game like what you have done. So that's a fair testament to you and the abilities that you had.
Yeah, there's a statistic out there, and don't entirely quote me on this, but it's a 0.000268% of all players who have ever played football get to play in the NFL. So yeah, there's an unlikelihood that you will get a chance as a football player to play in the NFL. And the average career is 3. I doubled that. So to do that, it gives me an immense source of pride, and about the fact that I was able to bring along, obviously my mom, dad, my brother, and the rest of my family, and they got to kind of enjoy it with them. I remember playing a game, Thursday Night Football. The game starts at 8 o'clock, and I come back to my phone after the game's over. It's probably 11 or 12, and I have texts from my cousins saying they were watching it in a local pub, right? Like, who would have ever thought you'd be watching a Tampa Bay Buccaneers game in Clones or in Navan or in Dundalk? Like, it's mind blowing the stuff that I was able to do. And after my rookie year, I came home to Clones and we did a couple of things around Largy College and some of the teams that were local just because of how much that place means to me. So to be able to kind of create a little bit of buzz for Clones because I'm associated with the town through the NFL, it was pretty special.
And I was just going to say the symmetry of that from St. Cheernocks Park to some of the biggest stadiums in the NFL, and we'll come back to Clonus again. And you're so passionate about that town, that area, in St. Cheernocks Park. And I know big fundraising going on there at the moment. I'll touch on that in a second or so, but it's amazing. I'd noted to you just when we were corresponding that a lot of people aren't aware outside of County Monaghan that St. Chinnock's Park is actually a club ground. It's always associated with the Monaghan County games. Obviously, the home of Ulster football, and we want it to remain that way. But at the end of the day, it's still a club ground.
It's the best ground in Ireland, and I may be biased in saying that, but to be honest with you, it's my favorite stadium I've ever played in, regardless of sport. And yes, again, the bias is probably showing there as well, but to me, the setting is perfect. And I've had some of the best moments of my life, either watching Monaghan play or actually playing myself in there. So the fact that it is still a club ground and will remain a club ground, and on Ulster final day, quite frankly, there's no place better to be. It's a truly special, special place.
Were you home for any of those Ulster successes in 2013, 2015? Did you get to experience it?
Yeah, I think it was back in was it back in 13? No, I just missed them actually, because in 2013 we were getting ready to go back for the season. And then in 2015, I was training. So unfortunately missed them. But my dad was back at least for one of them, I think, with my brother.
Right. So obviously, because of the NFL and what you were tied in with
Yeah,
there, the
yeah.
difficulty of that. But you were watching them, no doubt, I'd imagine, and taking it
Oh,
all in at that
didn't
time.
certainly didn't miss them on television, but yeah, unfortunately wasn't there in person.
That's unfortunate. I will hopefully now that things have changed and you've moved on from the footballing career, the opportunity will arise for you to come back and experience that. As I said, a lot of fundraising going on, a lot of work being done around St. Chinnock's Park, something to note whenever I go to it. And like that, from the perspective of what we do, love going to it for the big day, the game, just what it holds. And I'm regularly back and forth through Clonus, and every now and again you'll just stop, even when it's an empty stadium, you'll go in and just you'll just soak it in. You can take so much out of the place and the
Mm.
history that's
Mm.
associated with it.
It's like I said, when I go there, I am the happiest I have ever been. And I don't know why. Maybe it's because, one of my fondest memories is getting locked in there with my cousins, and we were just kicking balls, and Shango, I think, who was unfortunately passed away, but he locked us in there. Maybe he wanted us to stay for a little bit longer. Maybe he didn't realize we were still out there, but to me, that's one of the core memories that I have, and it's one of the best times of my life. And then again, watching games with my family there, going around with Kieran and Brendan, meeting different people that, I mean, I wouldn't know who I was talking to, but at the same time, they knew me. So to kind of have that interaction is fairly special as well. And I don't know what it is. There's just an aura about the place. Maybe because of where it's positioned in the country, maybe because of what's gone on, obviously, in that part of the world, but there's just something about it. And again, that's probably bias showing, but I think if you ask a lot of people when it comes to Ulster final day, there's nowhere better than St. Enoch's Park to have that game.
No, absolutely. I'll be biased with you. There's just something so special about it.
Mm.
So there is whenever you're there. I said big fundraising draw that's coming up, being organised by the club and the committee that's there, is coming our way in January. Some fantastic prizes. I see Super Bowl is in there. I've remembered the name of it this time. So I have Masters is in there, the Gaelic hurling, football, and the rugby as well. So a brilliant opportunity, wonderful opportunity. And I know you probably played your part in the background along with the committee here to bring this sort of prize fund together.
Yeah, a very small part. I have to give credit to the committee over there, James, Kieran, Shauna, and everybody that's involved with the club. They're really the driving force behind this. I I follow a lot. I don't know if there's ever been a giveaway that has this type of quality associated with it. So it's a very unique opportunity in that, yeah, you're going to get an opportunity to go to the Super Bowl in California. You're going to get an opportunity to go to Augusta National in Georgia to watch the Masters and the Champions Cup final, and obviously the Gaelic and the hurling that's included as well. But to me, I, I don't know of a better opportunity to go see some of the greatest sports in the world on the biggest stages in the world, and it's all because of Clonus and what they're trying to do.
Oh, absolutely. And you can check out more on the Clonus social media in regards to tickets and how to get involved in it and get your tickets for it and the draw in January. As a matter of interest, Pat, have you ever been to a Super Bowl final yourself? Then I know you noted to me that you don't go to as many NFLs as you would maybe to try to be at the Gaelic games and that, but have you ever had that opportunity yourself?
Yeah, so I saw the Seahawks and the Broncos in Giant Stadium, MetLife Stadium, a couple of years back. That's when Peyton Manning was quarterback of the Broncos and Russell Wilson was quarterback of the Seahawks. Seahawks won that game. It is astonishing the show that they put on. It's a pageantry really versus just being a football game. And Bruno Mars was the halftime show act. So you're getting to see a live concert from a top artist at the same time you're watching the two best football teams in the world compete. So it's quite an experience and it's not to be missed.
I was going to say that it's quite value for money then when you
It
consider
is.
all
It
that,
is.
that you're getting involved in that. Eh, It's lovely to know when you come home that you're out and about on the street and people obviously know who you are. And we all get caught by that where somebody says hello to us. It's an Irish thing and we might not necessarily know the person on the opposite side of the street. For you in America and for what you've achieved in the NFL, I take it, are you a recognizable sports person over in Florida? Really good
No,
people know
no,
you?
no.
No?
I'm like a regular guy walking down the streets,
Yeah.
and I'm very grateful for that. I've had successes in sport, and that's great. I've had, successes in my second life, business life, and that's great as well. But I'm very happy that I don't get recognized. Obviously, maybe up in New York and Rockland, people would know who I am and know my background because I still stay involved with the club. And maybe people in New Jersey at my high school know who I am because my jersey is hanging up there and stuff like that. But for the general population, no, they wouldn't recognize me.
It's a generational thing that there would be certain people, obviously, that would recall you and remember you for what you done for their team at that time. No different than I can recall clearly, and they'd be idols of sort, your Uncle Kieran, your Uncle
Yeah.
Brenton, and that team of 1985. It's the impression that you can leave on people, I suppose, is what I'd be thinking of.
Yeah, it's interesting you kind of mentioned that. There was a kick in high school where we went across to the West Coast and we played De La Salle, which was one of the best high schools in the country at the time. Very, very prominent school throughout high school football history. And we beat them and I kicked a game-winning field goal there. So if I go to this one pub, Brady's in Ramsey, the owner knows me because of that kick and I've left an impression there. And then in college, I had games where I would have hit certain milestones and broken records at Fordham. So people would remember me from that. And then in the NFL, it's primarily people in Ireland. It was their first NFL game that they watched because I was playing in it. So it is unique in that you kind of leave impressions everywhere you go just because you're doing something that's a little different.
And at the height of what you were at then as a professional sports star, would you have been mindful of that then, aware of the impression that you were leaving or how people were viewing you?
I would have been because my cousins would tell me what their friends were saying, and my mom and dad would tell me what some of my mom's colleagues and my dad's colleagues were saying, and people that would just reach out that they hadn't heard from in years, saying how proud they were of me and how excited they were for them. And so I would have been acutely aware of that, but at the same time, it never got to a point where it's all that I focused on. In the off seasons, I tended to do a little bit more with regards to, something that's philanthropic in nature, where I would give back to a particular cause that's important to my mom, my dad, myself. And when I would go back home to Clonus, I would try and stop by to different colleges or different teams and just give talks if people wanted me to give talks. I never charged for any of this because it was an honor for me to do it. And the fact that people are actually interested in what I was doing, which is just kicking a ball around the field, like that was payment enough.
And do you ever look back on the footage there? Obviously, I suppose if you want to look back, you noted at the start of this conversation about watching the grainy VHSs of the Monaghan games and that. From your own perspective and your own family, do you ever look back on your own sporting career?
Yeah, my wife keeps me pretty grounded. No, no, she's great, and I've actually known her my entire life. So I can vividly remember one of the first stories she told me. This was when we first started dating, was that she was actually watching me in bars in college playing the NFL. So it's kind of interesting. The most important people in my life, actually, the first time they saw me play was probably on television, which is kind of funny. Um, but yeah, we'll look back on it sometimes. I'm excited for my kids to grow up and get to an age where they can realize what exactly I did. And I'm still close enough with the teams that I played with to where I'm going to be able to bring them back, get them to the stadium, have them watch the game, and get a little bit more of a unique experience. So that to me is going to be exciting. It's going to be fun. Do I look back on it? I look back on it with pride, but I don't spend too much time on it.
I know, and obviously with the business you're involved in now, you're looking to the future and
Yeah.
planning in that regard. Are you still involved in the game, coaching perspective or anything like that?
No, I haven't really. Time is limited,
Yeah,
particularly with three Rugrats running around. So,
yeah.
so no, I haven't stayed involved much as far as coaching is concerned. My dad is still coaching. He's been at Don Bosco for 20 years now, coaching kickers. So he's kind of how I get my link back to the game. He'll call me after every game and kind of explain what happened and how the kickers are doing. And he and I will go back and forth on certain things regarding the kicking game. And if somebody ever reached out and said, "Look, would you help?" I'll happily help, but in a more limited capacity, probably.
Well, listen, Patrick, it's been an absolute honour to have had a chat with you here. It's a wonderful insight to a sport, as I say, that's growing more and more. Obviously, we know it's the number one sport in America, but the fact that it's coming now and being played over here as well, that link that Rory had established last year and the strong link, and you being one of the first to go from the GA background to the kicking game as well has been absolutely fascinating. And I know even just listening to you there, you have such a deep passion and love for Clonus, and you call it your hometown, which I think is lovely to hear that as well. You've still an awful lot of strong ties to that area.
I do. I always will. I always make it a point to get back whenever I'm home, because it is so important to me. It's given me everything. And I mean that because of the way that we grew up there, the times that we had there, the people that are associated with the town and with the club. They're just salt of the earth, fantastic people. And I'm so honored to be involved in the Ultimate Prize giveaway as well. So hopefully we can generate some interest there. People can get unique experiences at various sporting events, and we can help shape the next great boys and girls that are going to be playing for Clonus.
Yeah, absolutely. And you led nicely into that again. Just another reminder to you of that Clonus GA draw. The prizes are up for grabs. Tickets to the Super Bowl. You've got the Masters Golf in Augusta. You've got the Hurling All Ireland and the Football All Ireland. And indeed the Champions Cup final in rugby. And we should add, by the way, as well, accommodation, flights and all is included for all of those. Well, maybe you'll be flying from America back for the hurling and the football. It's not that much of a run, maybe up the N2 or the N3 back from Dublin from a Monaghan perspective to it here. But again, Pat, thanks again. An absolute pleasure to have chatted to you there. And as I said, a lovely insight for this, our Monaghan Way episode 20 podcast. Certainly hope you enjoyed that one. I think it's fair to say that was a milestone one for our 20th episode.